Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Dr. Arlene Taylor.
So, how in the health are you? Do you even know? It's important to know. I said that word very carefully. I hope you all heard it. How in the health are you? I've been accused of missing the last two letters. When you woke up this morning, did you give thanks that the Lord had allowed you to be born on this planet? With all its problems, I'm so glad to be here. Did you give thanks that He has allowed you to lease a brain and body for use on this planet? If you leased a Rolls Royce, how would you take care of it? Researchers from Christians to agnostics to atheists agree that the human brain is the most amazing piece of biological real estate in the universe, not just on this planet, in the universe. And you have the opportunity to use this vehicle for however long life may last. I've had the opportunity yesterday to almost lose my voice, talking with some of you, and I must say, I've done this for a long time, since the late 1800s at least, and I don't think I've ever had such thoughtful questions. I think you should give yourselves a hand. I have no agenda for you, but as Chaplain David said, the only reason I do this is to help you think about things that we don't usually talk about, unfortunately. One of the questions I had yesterday was, Dr. Taylor, aren't you really embarrassed to stand up there and talk about you know what? No, not the least bit embarrassed. Embarrassment is defined as an emotional motivator that arises when your brain knows that you have violated a value, a standard, and it gives you pause to ask yourself, what did I just do? Do I really want to ever do that again? That's all embarrassment is. Well, I did not violate any standard yesterday. And if I don't talk about it, who will? Because most people are scared to. So no, I'm not the least bit embarrassed. I will address one question, then we'll get into the formula for how you can be successful. And this is very new. In fact, I think you're the first academy that I will be talking about this at. I don't know if that's good grammar or not, but. So, a major question that came to me yesterday was, what in the world is wrong with masturbation? I would like to make you think about some of the things that are wrong, that are deleterious with masturbation. Not going to take long. And if you choose to be embarrassed, go for it. But I won't be. As near as I can understand sexuality, and I told you yesterday that the human brain, by consensus, is at least three things. What are they? Spiritual, relational, and sexual. I would be remiss if I came to this campus and only talked about 2/3 of who we are. As I understand sexuality, from everything I can read, it was never designed for self-gratification. That is how it is used in the world. It was never designed for self-gratification. It was designed for a couple who are committed for a lifetime to have pleasure and procreate if they choose to do so, and in the process pump 3 bonding chemicals, which are very different from the attraction chemicals, the major one of which is phenylethylamine, or PEA. As a nurse, in the years I worked in the emergency department, masturbation, like any addictive process, escalates. And I will not even begin to describe for you the males that we saw in the emergency department that had abused that so long they were in desperate physical straits. As someone who counseled couples for years, I will not go into the fact that when a couple marries, and especially the male has masturbated since he was 11 or 7 or whatever, and learned to quickly come to climax, because that's the only reason you do that, is to pump, dopamine so you get a hit of heroin, in effect. He's not going to find that hit with his wife. And let me tell you, it is not fun to be married to someone who has premature ejaculation. It is very unrewarding. So, you're going to have to decide if you want to do an addictive behavior or not, because all masturbation is self-gratification. It does nothing for your spirituality. This is the body. This is the temple of the Holy Ghost. Would you like to sit there and masturbate with Christ sitting beside you? How would that feel? Well, your guardian angel's sitting beside you. So, you're going to have to make a decision. I can just tell you that life is not about self-gratification. Life is about feeling good in relationships and in terms of spirituality. And because we live in a world that is so sick, we pay the price when we begin to go down that pathway. And I don't wish that for you. I have no agenda for you, with one exception. I'm really looking forward to meet my guardian angel, who I think has worked overtime for me. I'm quite sure that I could name you a dozen times when I believe I would not be here if my guardian angel had not intervened. I can hardly wait. When I meet that guardian angel, to the best of my ability, I would like not to be ashamed of the behaviors I had exhibited when that angel was standing beside me. So somebody asked me, do angels have sex? No, I don't think so. They're a different species from us. We have no evidence that they marry and procreate. Ellen G. White was really clear that God created all of the angels. I don't know if he created more after a third of them decided they really didn't like his governing. I don't know about that, but I don't think they're like humans. I don't think they have to eat. I don't think they have to breathe. They can transubstantiate themselves. They can turn themselves into something that can pass through a wall and rematerialize on the other side. We have no idea how exciting heaven is going to be. Getting to travel to other worlds and see species that look nothing like us. If you've read Ezekiel, then you have read the description of some of those species. They look like wheels in a wheel burning. I don't know how we're going to communicate, but it's going to be fun. To get there, we simply have to accept God's invitation to be part of his family. He's offered to adopt us. Go figure. And I want to accept that, and I want to be there, and I would love to have all of you there. All right, success. Let's see if this will work. There we go. What does success mean to you? Because every brain on the planet is different. There's never been a brain like yours in the history of this world. There never will be again. How do you feel knowing that you're one of a kind? Nobody will ever have a brain like yours again. And what are you doing with it on this planet? So, within your definition of success, what do you want to be? And how do you think you can get there? I wish I'd known this when I was your age. I really do. But none of us knew it because we didn't have the research. So this is what we think we know now about success. Let's do 3 quick definitions so we're all on the same page. It's really helpful if the audience knows what the speaker means. So, what's IQ? It's simply a range of inherited potential academic intelligence. That's the reason it doesn't work well in underdeveloped countries, because those countries have not had the background that many English-speaking countries like America and Britain and Canada and so on, Australia, have had. So to give those people an IQ test is ridiculous. It may have been, can't remember, was it Einstein? It may have been Einstein who said, if you want to evaluate the intelligence of a fish by whether or not it can climb a tree, you're going to think that fish is absolutely an idiot. So we have to be really careful when we're trying to evaluate IQ. You do get a range, parts from both of your parents, although there's some emerging research that girls may get more from their fathers and boys may get more from their mothers. Avoid thinking that their level of education determines their IQ. Right now, the highest IQ on record in the United States is in a woman, Marilyn Vaux-Savant. Highest IQ ever recorded. And when I told this to one group of college freshmen, one of them said, well, that doesn't hold any weight with me. The boys know they're smarter, so they don't even take the test. Which reminds me of the scripture, Hezekiah 13:13, that says, better to keep your mouth shut and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. So what is EQ? EQ is a set of learned skills you do not inherit, but that are distinct, although complementary, to IQ, that help you manage your emotions. Current research. 1996, they evaluated how much time managers in large companies were spending on employee conflicts. Almost 10%. You know, company owners, presidents, are not excited about paying 10% of their employee managers to try to help people get along with each other. All right, fast forward 10 years. Now the stats are 18 to 20% of a manager's time is spent in employee conflicts. And when you evaluate what they're conflicted about, it goes right back to low levels of emotional intelligence. And because it's not inherited, you can start raising yours anytime you want, and the sky is the limit. And then we come to SQ. This is now referred to as the success quotient. It is a perception of one's overall success in life. Not just one thing, not that they're really good at playing the guitar or really good at sports, but what's their all-over life success rate. And that is believed to be a key factor in how long you live and how well you live while you're alive. So, knowing that, let's talk a little bit about emotions and then what comprises the success quotient. So uterine scans, I may have mentioned this yesterday, show 4 core emotions that can be seen on the face of a fetus during pregnancy, depending on what's happening with the mother and how well the parents are getting along, or if she's even been abandoned and she's trying to go through this pregnancy by herself with no spouse and with her family rejecting her because she's an unwed mother. When you do PET scans, positron emission tomography, the person goes in a big circular camera that records where in the brain the cells are working that allow it to do whatever task they're asking it to do. They find that joy is aligned with the left hemisphere, which is very interesting because the left hemisphere is slower and more step-by-step and sequential. And yet when the person in the PET scan camera is feeling joyful, it's the left hemisphere that lights up. The other 3 core emotions are anger, fear, and sadness, and when any of those appear, it's the right side of the brain that lights up. The right hemisphere is much faster. Information flies across those neuron pathways at the rate of at least 600 miles an hour. And what are we talking about? 3 inches? It's lightning fast. Those 3 right hemisphere emotions are all positive. Every core emotion is positive. It's given to us to help us manage a specific situation in life. They're my 4 best friends in my brain. The behaviors around them are what are negative, not the emotions themselves. So anger tells you your boundaries have been invaded. You can take a look at them and reset them as needed. Fear tells you you're in danger unless you're just imagining it, and you can help keep yourself safe. And sadness tells that you have experienced a loss, and you can recognize that and grieve it and let it go. Do not develop a slush fund in your brain of unrelieved loss, ungrieved loss, because someday one tiny thing will happen. It will be the tipping point for your brain, and you'll probably do something that when you wake up the next morning, you will sincerely wish you had never done, because that slush fund of unresolved grief pours out to you. All right, why do you have emotions? Many people have said to me, if I just didn't have emotions, I could get through life so well. No, you could not. A clock cannot tell time unless it has an energy source. You cannot do anything without an energy source. And your energy source are your emotions. They give you energy to take action. They get your attention. They connect your conscious mind, which is like 10% of your subconscious, with your subconscious, because your subconscious mind is taking in information at the rate of 10 million bits per second. You could not even process that. And when it notices something in the environment that it thinks you ought to know, it triggers an emotion to get your attention and give you information. It helps you, believe it or not, make good moral and ethical decisions. And it binds your perception to what you believe. So that if you believe something and then you get a strong emotion about that, it will seem even more real than it is. And that's why it's so important to know how to manage them. This has a very interesting delay. So, EQ. biggest reason for high emotional intelligence, in my brain's opinion, is that it tends to minimize conflict. And conflict is very, very expensive. And this shows the 2006 stats that 18% of a manager's time is trying to keep the employees from killing each other. So my dad, the preacher, I think he spent a lot more time than that. The only people in his office were people who were really angry about something. And that's unfortunate. Okay, let's go back to the SQ formula. Now you understand about the emotions, the reason we have them. So here's the formula. SQ equals IQ plus EQ. So whatever your IQ is, plus whatever your level of emotional intelligence is, equals how successful you're going to be in life. So, here's another study. Successful managers often have a very average IQ. What's the IQ in the United States? Average? 100. Same thing in Australia, 100. It's the mean. Very successful managers tend to have a very average IQ. You know, it's probably still under the bell curve, 85, 90, 95, 100, 105, 110. But they have a very high EQ, which allows them to use their IQ effectively. And less successful managers often have a really high IQ outside the bell curve, 120, 125, 130. But their EQ is absolutely in the toilet. And they're not successful. So, Peter Scazzarzo, if that is how you pronounce his name, has written a book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. Now remember, we are spiritual beings. How are we emotionally healthy spiritually? He says, Christian spirituality without an integration of an emotional health can be deadly to yourself, your relationship to God, and the people around you. It is impossible. You know the word impossible. It is impossible to be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature. I'm sure you've met people, as I have, whose brains should be developed because they're in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, but they're acting like 5-year-olds emotionally. And it's really unattractive. Family patterns from the past, back 3 or 4 generations, are played out in our present relationship without us necessarily even being aware of it if you have low emotional intelligence. I think we can skip that one. Let's go to this one. All right. What do mature adults look like if they have high levels of emotional intelligence? On the left side is represented the characteristics of people with high EQ. On the right side are representative words from people who have very, very low EQ, if they have any at all. So, high EQ, they're satisfied. That's not that they're not moving on to accomplish more, but they're content right now. They're satisfied. They're not whining and complaining and blaming. They're aware. They know when an emotion has arisen, and they get the information that emotion is telling them. They're balanced. They get enough sleep. They drink enough water to reduce the risk of dementia, and so on. They're peaceful. They have good self-esteem. They know that they are valuable, especially in Christ's eyes, simply because they exist. Not for what they do, just because they are. They're happy, they're grateful, they're appreciative. They're motivated. But even in their motivation, they're contented. They're connected. There's the relational part. They're calm. They're interdependent. They're not independent or codependent, if you will. They're energetic and they perceive success. They see in their mind's eye what they want to accomplish, and every day they do something to move toward that. So, if you're an employer, who do you want to hire? I don't want to hire anybody except those with high EQ. Come on. Who do you want to live with? So here's the deal when you're choosing a life partner. Relationships, like water, seek their own level. I said that yesterday. Raise your EQ as high as you can in this age group. Keep raising it, and you will be attracted to and attractive to others who have a similar level of EQ, and that predisposes success. So let's talk about job behaviors. Large sample studies show that when you're looking at low EQ, and I know none of you have ever done job behaviors, I'm quite sure of that. When you're looking at emotional intelligence and low levels, there are 3 key types of behaviors that represent low EQ. My parents didn't know anything about emotional intelligence. Goldman didn't even release his book till the mid-90s, 95, I think it was. We never heard of the term emotional intelligence. We didn't know what it meant. We didn't know how to build it. We didn't know how much it contributed to success. In the success equation, how much does EQ contribute? 80%. Good. I told you they were pretty smart. Seriously. All right, so here are the 3 JOT behaviors. I've labeled them JOT behaviors because I like acronyms. So the first one is jumping to conclusions. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands the last time anybody jumped to conclusions in this room. O stands for overreacting. And T stands for taking things personally. When I realized that my parents could not teach me about EQ because they didn't know anything about it, and you can only teach what you know, and you only know what you know, this is what I started working on, job behaviors. I thought I had it pretty well handled. I mean, after all, I'd been director of Napa County Health Department. I'd had some fairly decent employment opportunities. But when I started to keep track, I carried a pad of paper with me, and every time I did a job behavior, I wrote down the date and the time. And as the list got longer, I was frankly appalled. So I began to work on that. Long term, I don't think you can ever have a successful marriage unless you're working on job behaviors. Because as you live in that close a proximity to someone year after year, if you are jumping to conclusions, overreacting, and taking things personally, you will poison that relationship. So what do? Well, there is an antidote for low EQ behaviors. Let me digress long enough to tell you the last time I observed a low EQ behavior. I was lecturing at a large hospital, and the topic actually for the managers was EQ. And as I was finishing a session, one of the managers came up to me and said, "Could you come with me? We have an emergency in one of the offices." And I thought, I don't work here. That's your job. But the manager looked pretty distraught, so I went. Walked into the room, and here's this big, tall, very good-looking young man lobbing things at the wall as fast as he can. You know, there's a pair of scissors jammed into the wall, there's a letter opener, there's a stapler. I mean, there's all kinds of things slammed into that wall. And as I walked into the room, he had picked up the laptop of one of the people in the room and was getting ready to lob that. And I said, "Stop." And he looked at me. I said, "Can you tell me the reason you were angry?" "I'm not angry." I said, can you explain to me the reason that you are throwing things at the wall? He's 37. He says, I'm just a little frustrated. And I said, can you explain to me what you're frustrated about? Well, he says, one of the employees here said that she'd go across campus and get me a cup of coffee, and she's not back yet, and I hate to wait. I said, so when did she leave? Looks at his watch. He goes, about 4 minutes ago. Talk about inability to delay gratification. I said, I time myself walking over this morning. It takes 7 minutes to walk across the campus. So that's 7 minutes plus maybe waiting in line to get you a cup of coffee, buying it, coming back. We're looking at 15 or 20 minutes. What is your problem? I told you I don't like to wait. So we finally got him calmed down. He jumped to the conclusions that she ought to be able to do it in 4 minutes. He was overreacting to the max. And he was taking personally the fact that she wasn't meeting his expectations because they were unrealistic. Well, he doesn't work there anymore. And there was a sizable fee assessed to repair the wall and the equipment that was broken being lobbed at it. Now that may be a somewhat extreme example, but if I was into betting, I would bet every one of you knows somebody who's exhibited a behavior somewhere like that. You don't want them for an employee. You don't want to be married to one of them. So, the antidote is what I now call AAA. I like acronyms. You know, I have AAA insurance, by the way, and it guarantees me some roadside assistance if I get in trouble. Well, I look at the AAA behaviors as giving me some life side insurance. And it's not that I'm never tempted to do a job behavior. Sometimes I am. I shake my head and I go, I can't believe this. But then I take a deep breath and I go for AAA because I'm the one that job behaviors hurts the most because it suppresses immune system function and all kinds of things. So the first A in AAA, ask questions to clarify. Jumping to conclusions may put you way off base and out in left field. So back to this 37-year-old. When he was having trouble delaying gratification, he could have said, how long do you think it's going to take to walk across campus and get some coffee? And if he was willing, that could have stopped him from the barrage against the wall. 2, especially when there's escalating conflict, act really calmly as you assess the situation. Do not launch a tsunami. Take a deep breath and say, okay, what do you suppose is going on here? How much of this is my contribution and how much is it somebody else's? Here's another research finding that I'd like you to memorize. In any two-party conflict situation, 70% of the impetus for the conflict is your background, your history. And we blame the other person. That's only worth 30%. So, 3, as you evaluate this, because it's so easy to take things personally, you may want to alter your perception. I call it reframing. You know, you know that concept. You have a painting in your house with a frame around it, and you're not really excited about the painting. It's kind of getting old, and the frame never really did match. You picked it up at a at a secondhand store, so you didn't have to pay a lot for the frame. Nothing wrong with that, but you're really tired of it now. Finally, you decide you're going to take this painting and you're going to take it to a company, and you're going to have them construct a new frame. And when you bring it home, you can't believe it was the same picture. Looks entirely different. Totally different perspective. All right, you want to reframe the event and what your perception of it is, because if you take time to do that, you are much less likely to take it personally, and you're much more likely to look at the 70% that you may be contributing to this conflict based on your own past experience. So that's what I'm working on now. AAA, remember the 70%. Let me give you an example of what studies show that several groups of people are like who have very low EQ. So adults who are babies in terms of emotional intelligence, they've never even heard about it, they haven't built any skills. All right, they cannot delay gratification. They cannot wait. If they feel something, they just let it fly. Like the 37-year-old and his cup of coffee. They want someone to either take care of them or do it for them. They're always trying to get out of work. They use tantrums to get their own way, and the tantrums can be yelling and screaming and throwing things, and it can be gossiping, and it can be backbiting, and it can be all kinds of things. They really look at others somewhat narcissistically. You're on this planet to take care of me. And they are usually either very over-controlling or they're very over-compliant. I'll lie down and let you walk on me, and then they hate you for doing it. Adults who are children emotionally, and we're talking, under 17 or 18, they pout, they whine, they throw tantrums, they complain, they throw objects. They stamp their feet, metaphorically, and you've seen this happen. And if they don't get what they want, then you're out of their life. They isolate themselves from you. They take disappointments or just a simple difference of opinion personally. They're often very sarcastic. They retaliate with, "You never loved me. You would have treated me like that if you ever loved me." And I will digress to say that genuine love never dies a natural death. Genuine love loves forever. If it dies, it's because we have done something to kill it, failed to nurture it, expected too much from it. They act hurt very easily. What you did to me just hurt me so badly. Well, maybe you didn't like it, but you choose how much you're going to hurt, and you choose how long you're going to hurt, and you choose when and if you're going to stop being hurt. You've heard people say, "I'm just so stressed." Right. That can be a real challenge to deal with, like you're responsible for fixing their stress. So, adults who are teenagers. Teenagers are very narcissistic. It is all about them. That's not necessarily bad till the brain gets more developed. But if a teenager does not learn to manage the narcissistic tendency, here's the research. They have a high risk for turning into a sociopath. Because if it's all about you, then you don't really care what you do to others as long as it benefits you. So adults who are teenagers tend to live defensively. If anybody offers to criticize them and say, I think you could have done this better, they just go off on a tangent. They blame others. When somebody wants to help them, they often refuse to even talk to the person. I know what I'm doing. Don't criticize me. They tend to be much more critical and judgmental of others than they are at examining themselves and their own behaviors. They're very self-absorbed. You've seen this in groups. Somebody starts to tell an experience that happened to them, and someone else will say, "That's nothing. Let me tell you what happened to me." And the person who was telling their experience gets shut down. They tend to do anything to look better in the eyes of others. And that means they may lie or exaggerate or do anything to make themselves look better. That's an undeveloped brain. And the goal is to grow up in the love and affirmation of the Lord and learn these skills. So is it possible to rewire your brain for success as you look at the success quotient and you look at job behaviors and you analyze? Paul says, examine yourselves. Well, I had to sit down and write down every single time I did a job behavior to become aware of it so I could make a different choice. That's what it takes to be successful in the long term. So Doc Childer and Howard Martin, one of these times it would be really fun to talk to you about the heart. He is a co-founder of the Heart Math Solution. And it's all about their discovering that as you think in your heart, what does that remind you of? There's a scripture. As you think in your heart, what? As you think in your heart, so are you. The heart has its own nervous system. It doesn't need the brain. It communicates with the brain all the time, but it's got its own nervous system, and what they're learning about the heart is just staggering. So he says, your habitual attitudes form neural circuits in the brain. If you choose to maintain a specific attitude, the brain can literally rewire itself to facilitate that attitude. Do you know what good news that is? If there's something in your life that you need to alter, all you need to do is maintain a specific attitude, positive, hopeful, empowering, all of the definitions that go along with high levels of EQ, and your brain will rewire itself. And to me, that's all about Scripture, where it talks about the renewing of your mind. You can create your own software. So, bottom line, you're the only person that can do this for yourself. I'd love to wave a magic wand and have all of you suddenly have really high levels of EQ, because that will guarantee your success. But I can't. It's up to you to examine yourself. Look at your behaviors, understand what EQ looks like, and facilitate the attitude that will rewire your brain. And that's what I want for you. Thank you.